Hello, I am Terri Schierer, Chairman of the Local Government Committee of the League of Women Voters of the Greater Rockford. We'll be presenting today, Making Herstory, Meet and Greet Rockford's first women police and fire chiefs. Today, we will be talking with Chief Redd and Chief Panko. They are the first women to hold these positions in Rockford's history. It is the first time that the Rockford Police Department will be led by a person of color. Each chief will share their vision with us today and answer a few pre-submitted questions. Now, we have the honor today of having Mary McNamara Bernsten serve as our moderator of our forum. Now, Ms. Bernsten is the Rockford Area Arts Council Executive Director. Mary is an enthusiastic Rockford native with more than 2 decades of experience teaching and promoting the arts in our community. And she has a great passion and commitment to the community connection, public services, and justice in all forms. Mary is also serving on the board of Women's March Rockford and the board of YMCA of Rockford River Valley. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Mary.
Thank you, Terri. And thank you, Chief Panko, for participating in this public forum. Engaged and informed citizenry is the foundation for the League of Women Voters of Greater Rockford. Today's forum is just one example of how the League engages with the community and helps to develop more informed and engaged citizens in our region. Today's forum will include a short bio of each chief, followed by a 10-minute statement about how they will address their vision and priorities in their new role as chief. Following the individual 10-minute statements, there will be a 20-minute question and answer portion to the forum. As explained previously, the questions were sent in before the forum by attendees, and only the previously submitted questions will be asked at this forum today. Thank you for joining us. Before I give you a moment here, Chief Panko, I'd love to give a little bio for those in attendance. Michelle Panko was sworn in as the 11th Fire Chief of the Rockford Fire Department on September 8th, 2021. She made history when she became the first woman in the existence of the department to serve as the Fire Chief. Before serving as Fire Chief, she was the Division Chief of Operations, which included the Emergency Services Disaster Agency Coordinator for the City of Rockford. Additionally, since starting with the department in 1992, Chief Panko has served as a firefighter, a training officer, an EMS operations chief, a lieutenant, a captain, and a district chief. Many hats. Chief Panko has a bachelor's degree from Southern Illinois University and a master's degree in public administration from Northern Illinois University. She also holds certification as an Illinois Professional Emergency Manager, an IPEM, from the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, and designation as a Chief Fire Officer, a CFO, through the Center for Public Safety Excellence. Chief Panko was awarded the American Red Cross Disaster Services Hero in April 2021, an award given by the Red Cross of Illinois to honor individuals for acts of bravery, dedication, and service to the community. Welcome, Chief Panko.
Thank you.
Yes, we're so happy to have you. Please share now your 10-minute statement with the forum's attendees.
Well, first of all, thank you again for having me today and giving me the opportunity to share some of my thoughts and my vision for the fire department. Like any person in charge of or behind or part of a leadership team, many of the visions that we have are developed and based around challenges that we face. So it's no different for the fire department. And so much of my vision is centered around some of the major challenges that we do face. 3 of them that I feel that really are pretty big challenges, but ones that we certainly can address are the increasing number of EMS calls, or our EMS, emergency medical calls for service, our recruitment effort, and the effort to represent our community more in those that we hire, and our workforce, and then our aging infrastructure. So with those three challenges, kind of that's where my vision is centered. Looking at the EMS calls for service, I see that we need to reimagine the way that we deliver our services. Regarding the recruitment and representing our community, I believe that we need to recruit and reinvest in the schools and the children in our community and start young and essentially develop a pipeline to feed into the fire department. And then finally, regarding the aging infrastructure, I believe that being more intentional about where we locate our resources, being more intentional about how we co-locate resources, and making sure that we are still maintaining a very high level of service to our community, that will help to address some of the infrastructure concerns that or challenges that we do have. So, going back to the EMS call volume and reimagining, what does that mean? Well, for me, what it means is focusing more on the proactive side of the EMS call. Typically, we respond to a call. We're much more reactive, right? So, focusing on the front end and how can we reduce that call volume? What are some ways that we can reduce the number of calls for service that we respond to? And maybe we put those calls for service with a more appropriate type of response. So we can do that in a number of ways. We can do that through call prioritizing within the 911 center. So the call comes in and we run a series of questions, the call is prioritized, and then perhaps routed to another service. In conjunction with call prioritizing, also looking at having a nurse as part of that team and that process in the 911 center, that would give us an opportunity to reroute calls to maybe a more appropriate service, something that doesn't necessarily require an emergency response. Additionally, we currently have what are called mobile integrated health managers. It's like a community paramedic. So building that program out even more to encompass behavioral health as a piece of that community paramedicine is also another method to try and reduce those calls on the front end. And that community paramedic, they actually work with folks that utilize our services, that maybe utilize our services because that's the only thing that they know. They don't understand for a particular illness, chronic illness, that there are other services available. So that community paramedic, expanding that program, again, to try and reduce those calls. As far as recruitment goes, I talked just briefly about getting back into the schools. I know that we have been in the schools in the past, but I believe this is something that should start at the very beginning, kindergarten, all the way through. So we do have a program that we're currently rolling out. It's the K-5 piece, and that is a series of videos that talk about a day in the life of a firefighter. And things that firefighters do, and that is supplemented with a lesson plan for teachers, and then that's also complemented with periodic visits from somebody from the fire department, whether it's our recruiter, whether it's a firefighter, but we do support that piece for the K-5, and it's a 10-week program, and there would be 3 visits throughout that program. And then moving on into the middle schools would also have the video component, the lesson plan component, as well as a podcast with a firefighter. So they would have the periodic podcasts throughout the 10 weeks. And then finally transitioning into high school, this is the piece that's really still in development, and that is all of the stuff that we have in that middle school program, and then an additional internship piece. And that would provide a pipeline for the fire department. One thing that I don't know that young people as well as the community realize is the number of services and all of the opportunity that you have with the fire department. So that is part of the message as we look at recruitment and messaging out just exactly what you can do to prepare yourself, all of the services that we do offer, and all of the different opportunities that we have, and getting that message out. So in addition to the schools, really hitting the social media piece and developing what I see as a QR code, and you click on the QR code, you take a picture of it, and it sends you to a couple of clicks away from everything you need to do to become a firefighter, all of the opportunities that it opens, education piece that you can have to support it, and anything you want to know about the fire department. So we are working behind the scenes to build that piece out as well. And then finally, going back to the aging infrastructure, one thing that I really do see as a priority for our infrastructure is trying to develop a funding source that would be a regular funding source. And I don't know yet what that looks like, but attaching that to a recurring type of capital that would support maintenance for infrastructure, so that we could obviously get the most life out of our structures, but then also for redeveloping some of the very aging infrastructure. And then when we look at that piece and redevelopment, not doing it in a vacuum, but taking a look at our service area, has it grown, calls for service, and is there the need to relocate, perhaps relocate a structure, relocate resources, but taking a look at that holistically to see how that would best fit in our service to the community. So truly, those are the three major visions that I have for the fire department. Again, working proactively to reduce the call volume for our emergency medical calls for service, the recruitment for our to more represent our community in terms of our workforce, and then finally the aging infrastructure and being more purposeful and intentional as to how we support that infrastructure and fund, quite honestly, that infrastructure.
Thank you, Chief.
Mm-hmm.
Those are excellent efficiency practices, a focus on education, it sounds like, and then those unity building efforts. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to move on to the question and answer component of this afternoon. And our first one is Homeland Security. Some of our audience may not know your role in Homeland Security. Please outline briefly what the fire department role is in relationship to Homeland Security.
The fire department really does play a frontline role in Homeland Security. So we have, in excess of 1.4 million firefighters across the country that are embedded and woven into the community. And the biggest piece that they provide at that level is situational awareness. So how does it trickle down to Rockford? It trickles down, quite honestly, post 9/11, presidential directive was issued saying, you know what, everybody needs to get on the same page. And that's truly what that's truly what it was all about. The entire country needs to get on the same page. All first responders, law enforcement, medical, fire, everybody needs to be doing the same thing towards the same effort. And so that's exactly what we did. And locally, how that trickles down to the city of Rockford, we became an accredited, non-mandated emergency services disaster agency through the state of Illinois, through IEMA. So that's the Illinois Emergency Management Agency. So what does all of that mean? So quite honestly, beyond fire medical response, it also means that the city of Rockford responds to disasters. So any type of severe weather event, any type of large scale event where you're going to have resources used across different disciplines. So civil unrest, a little thing we call a pandemic, most recently, right? And then even, hazardous materials response, which, we just also supported the chem tool incident in Rockton, Illinois. So it's really considered an all hazards approach. And our fire department, the citizens in the city of Rockford really truly are so fortunate because we do have, we are a non-mandated accredited agency. So we do our own emergency services. So in terms of funding and reimbursement for that, we don't have to go through the county. We can go directly to the state, which really is, it does help the workflow, if you will, to be able to request resources directly from the state should we need them to support an incident. And we did do just that and some of that during our pandemic response. And then a little bit for the response to the chem tool incident. So that's really how Homeland, or the fire department, I should say, does play a role in Homeland security as a whole, as a nation, but then also locally, our all hazards response to disasters as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Chief. This does lead really well into our next question, the environmental emergency response. With the Rockton chemical plant event in mind, are there any necessary changes needed to the response plan in the fire department? And if you could just briefly outline that for us. So seeing what you saw as chief in that position, and then what could change moving forward.
Certainly. So we responded in two different ways. So we just talked about the emergency response and the disaster preparedness. So the city of Rockford, in conjunction with Winnebago County, opened the Winnebago County EOC to support that incident. So from that level, we were supporting things like information. So we have a joint information group that messages out to the public. We were also supporting with fuel for fire trucks that were up there on the scene. We were supporting it through National Weather Service reports so that we were able to help support predicting the plume, so on and so forth. So those are some of the operations that were happening in the EOC. At the incident itself, the fire department, Rockford Fire Department, responded as part of what's called a mutual aid box alarm system. So that's a pre-designated cooperation between all of the fire departments in the area. And as part of that, our hazmat team, our hazardous materials response team responded. And then I also responded to support the incident command post at the actual incident. So we truly have two different responses in any type of an incident like that. So things moving forward that we would probably try to improve on. One is always communication, right? So being able to get the right people in the right place with the right information, get it vetted, and then get that pushed out. So ways that we can support that. One thing is working with our public information officer to make sure, our public information group, to make sure that we are getting information to them in a timely manner that can be pushed out to the community. That doesn't necessarily change a plan that we have in place already, because we do have that in our plan. It's just getting better at executing the plan, right? So that's definitely one. And then there's always, we do what's called a hot wash after any type of activation like that. And there's always stuff that we can do and readjust And one thing in our plan that we do intend to readjust moving forward is our mass care, which is large numbers of people that were being evacuated, right? So reevaluating that and making sure that we are targeting the individuals that need the resource. And then the other piece, which goes hand in hand with the mass care piece, and that's alternate housing. What does that look like? And that is something that we would change, or not change, but that we need to, again, be more focused on as far as who needs it and how quickly we can get them there. Environmentally speaking, we really did have a lot of pieces in place. Clearly, once the fire piece was taken care of, the command piece transitions to, that was the health department. They were the lead agency once we transitioned to the environmental piece. And so, changes regarding that. I believe that, we did support the health department pretty robustly in their ability to get out and make sure that they were meeting all of their objectives and accomplishing all of their pieces of the puzzle, if you will. So that is, I know that that's a pretty long response, but it was two totally different responses that we were involved in from two different perspectives.
Yes, how many moving parts in a situation like that, so unexpected. Thank you, that was a great answer. I want to pause our question and answer for a moment and introduce our other special guest, Chief Carla Redd. What we are doing, Chief Redd, is I gave a little bio about Chief Panko, and I will do the same for you. And then I'd like to give you 10 minutes to introduce yourself and give us a little synopsis of your priorities and your vision and how you will accomplish those. And then we can get into maybe a couple of questions for Chief Redd, and then maybe we can bounce back and forth going from there. Thank you so much. I will now tell everybody all about you, Chief Redd. Chief Redd joined the Rockford Police Department in 1998. She served as a patrol officer, field training officer, community services officer, detective, and sergeant before becoming the first Black woman to achieve a command rank as a lieutenant in 2015. She holds an associate's degree in criminology from Rock Valley College, a bachelor's degree in sociology with an emphasis in criminal justice from Northern Illinois University, and a certification in criminal justice from the University of Virginia. Chief Redd is also a graduate of the FBI National Academy. Welcome, Chief Redd. Now I will ask you to share with us your 10-minute statement with the forum's attendees.
Thank you so much. 10-minute statement for intro, or what else? What else am I given here? I am a Rockfordian, born and raised, and I've always put that out front. So very fond memories growing up in Rockford. My mom is an educator, retired educator now, who always told us as kids growing up, you can be whatever you wanted to be, set your mind to it, and essentially the sky is the limit. So coming through the ranks at the Rockford Police Department, it's, not been an easy task, but I'm glad I've been able to, climb my way up that ladder, if you will. It's no secret. We have some challenges before us within the city. Unfortunately, I'm just leaving a homicide scene, so that's why I'm running late. So thank you for making the necessary adjustments for me to be here. So I have some excellent men and women right now in law enforcement as a whole. We are combating the issues of recruitment with the climate being what it is right now. We're not seeing the numbers as far as citizens who are applying and want to be police officers. So I can, use all of your help in regards to that, that's for sure. So we're having to shift some things in how we do business, but definitely drilling down on the violent crime in the city of Rockford.
Thank you, Chief. If you have any other points you would like to share, or a perspective of where you see your department going, it could be big picture, or it could be kind of your typical 3-bulleted report. That's probably not something you say here, but your 3 points that you would like to share. Your priorities, your vision for your time in this position.
Well, definitely as a whole, when you think about the city, my number one priority is bringing down the violent crime in the city. We have excellent men and women that work for us, and I'm definitely trying to keep them on board, and, as well as bringing new officers on board once again. So that's a struggle that we're facing, to the point where I'm actually we're putting together a recruitment team. So currently at the department, we only have one recruiter. So I'm actually having, the guys are taking letters right now where that we will have upwards of probably 5 individuals where the recruitment will be a secondary function of their job, because it's difficult with one recruiter to get them out to all of the various events and, and have those conversations with trying to bring young people on board. As well as officer wellness is at the top of that list also. We've seen over the years where officer suicide has increased, and we've done a good job, I'd say, overall, with removing the stigmatism associated with PTSD, if you will, and some of the other things that the officers, experience, the acute trauma versus the chronic trauma, and removing that stigma and having those conversations so that our officers are better and they can provide the community with better service.
Excellent, thank you. So I heard recruitment, officer wellness, and then bringing down the violent crime.
Correct.
Great, thank you. So what I will do now is open it up to questions for you, Chief Redd, to kind of catch you up to where Chief Panko is. We asked 2 questions, so I'll just start off with our first 2. One is traffic issue. Rockford has seen an increase in excessive speeding resulting in fatalities. What plans are being made, or what has already been put into place to decrease the speeding incidents and lower fatalities?
So one of the things that we've been doing for the past several months is running what's called wolf packs, where that my officers will go out, and there may be 6, 7, 8, 9 of them working in packs together. We receive on a daily basis, we take in traffic complaints for speeding issues across the city. So the supervisor who's over our traffic unit, he collects that data and looks at deploying resources to those areas. So it's right now, with the call load being what it is, our patrol officers, they can assist from time to time, but having a designated traffic unit definitely helps, so I can, put those larger numbers out to tackle some of the speeding complaints that we get. Also, we're working with some of our community, our law enforcement partners, I'd say, as well. We just had a meeting with the state police, who you see from time to time within the area. So we're just trying to get more coverage, if you will, in regards to focusing on the speeding issues that we're facing in the city. So having received the dates that the state police will be in town, we're transferring over our complaints to them as well, so they're not, shooting blindly, if you will, in regards to where they should focus on enforcement in the areas. And also, we're looking to collaborate with them. In addition to that, you probably have seen the speed trailers out a bit more recently. I was on my way home the other night and actually received a text that one of our officers, it was oversight on their part, but they put the speed trailer in the bicycle lane on Springbrook. So had to have some guys come out that night to take care of it, but they were on the complaint that came in, but unfortunately they, it wasn't deployed in the best place. So they got the speed trailer moved out of there, and actually we had some officers out there running radar.
It's good to remember officers are people too.
Right.
You're living and learning. Great, sounds like a good approach. Second question is having probably something to do with where you were at today at the beginning of this forum, shootings. Please outline what the department is doing or plans to do to get guns off the street and address the gang issue and reduce the shootings in our community. Kind of a loaded question, no pun intended.
Yeah, that's multifaceted, I would say. So take a look at it. I want to say I just looked at the numbers on Friday. We have a 79% increase in gun collections compared to where we were year to date last year. So almost 80% more guns we've recovered off the streets. And that just speaks volumes to what the men and women are doing out there on a daily basis. But also that tells a story that there's a lot more guns out there than we perhaps thought. I had a opportunity to speak with a group recently, and we know over the past year that more citizens have purchased more guns. With that also, there's an education component to be said to that, because keeping your gun in your vehicle, in your glove box or what have you, is not the best place for it, because we get those individuals that are out looking for crimes of opportunity, and they're just checking doors. And if they find that door unlocked, they're going in the car. And so we've also seen an increase in reports of guns being stolen. I think it was to the point of about 30% more guns stolen this year as compared to last year. So we're just, like I said, I have officers also assigned to the ATF task force in the city of Rockford as well. So they work on a daily basis and do tracing on the guns and where they're coming from and things of that nature. So that's something that we will definitely continue on. If I had the additional bodies, I'd definitely put some additional manpower in that unit. But right now, unfortunately, I have 2 officers there, but I can't afford to put any more there, because recognizing the frontline officers that are out there on a daily basis responding to the calls for service is where we have to maintain our focus as well, because I don't want any citizen to be in a situation where they call and the officers aren't available. So I have to make sure we staff that also. Our gang unit, we just put a new sergeant in the gang unit as well. They do a phenomenal job with working in the background and gathering a bunch of intelligence information. We know who our individuals are that are causing the majority of the crime in the city of Rockford. There's no doubt about that. Historically, it shows that you're dealing with, 90% of your crime is caused by about 10% of the individuals that are in the city. So we know who those individuals are, and we're working collaboratively with our law enforcement partners as well. So one of the things that we will have coming, well, we've actually done it in the past. We're working on getting some things back together, where that we're partnering with the county, with the state, with Loves Park as well, where we will increase our manpower and go out and attack some of the issues that we know that are plaguing our city.
Thank you, Chief. As a citizen, it can feel so random. So hearing that data really helps, and your approach to gun violence. Thank you for those answers.
You're welcome.
Let's bounce back to you, Chief Panko, if you don't mind. We will go on with recruitment. This will be a good question to ask both of you, and I'll rephrase it a little bit differently because the data is different. So Chief Panko, recruitment. In the 2020 annual report, 20 new firefighters were hired, 15 retired. A lower staffing ratio makes meeting OSHA requirements challenging of 2 inside a fire, 2 outside to rescue. What recruitment efforts are in place to hire the needed employees with qualification in the Rockford area?
So that's a 2-part question. Obviously, we'll talk, the first piece will be the recruitment efforts, and then the second piece addressing the 2 in, 2 out that you mentioned in terms of OSHA. So the recruitment piece, we just completed a testing cycle and have a preliminary list put together, and no doubt about it, our numbers were much lower this year, this recruiting cycle, than previous recruiting cycles. Part of that is because things were shut down for quite a while last year, and there was we weren't as good or hadn't quite mastered the ability to pivot initially and go remote with a lot of our recruitment efforts. So we have worked to make sure that should that situation arise, or should we have to do some type of a hybrid, that we are prepared for that and able to pivot quickly in our recruitment efforts. But more importantly about the recruitment, we really want to move the needle on reflecting our community. And we have made some strides, very small strides, but we have made some and would like to really continue moving in that direction. I'd like to take bigger leaps, but I do realize that it also is sort of a long-term solution that I'd like to have solidly built and in place. And I talked a little earlier about the school program. And I really do feel that is 100% where it starts. We start in our local schools and we start young, and we continue to message and teach and let the kids know what it is we do, what's the route to get there. And we continue that piece all the way up to and through high school. So in terms of our recruitment effort, long-term solution is what I hope to achieve. And what I mean by that is it may take us a little bit longer to start reflecting and moving in the direction we want, but I think the more intentional we are about that program, I think it will last and it will become something long-term and just part of how we bring our young people onto the department and into the workforce. So that's the recruitment piece. And just a side note too, although our numbers of candidates were down this time around, one thing that was the absolutely qualified. I mean, this time around, I feel that the board, while they had fewer numbers, they really did have some challenges because we had so many qualified and just outstanding candidates that applied. So, kudos to the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners for sorting through all of that. And like I said, we hope to start getting those numbers in the right direction, both in terms of overall numbers of candidates as well as the candidates to reflect our community so that we can build that into our workforce. And then the second piece of that, you had talked about 2 in, 2 out through OSHA, and the 20 folks retired and we hired 15, or I'm sorry, 20 folks we hired and 15 retired. So simply what 2 in, 2 out is, that's part of the Respiratory Protection Act. And what it's meant to do is provide that initial safety for firefighters when you get on scene. We call it 2 in, 2 out, and that develops into what's called a rapid intervention team. And so our numbers of firefighters, we use those numbers, we use our risk assessment to build our response so that we ensure that we have 2 in, 2 out at all times available to our personnel. So that is something that is 100%, regardless of the number of personnel that we have. It is built into our response for every type of structural firefighting response.
Thank you, Chief Panko. It sounds like it's really the number of the 2 in, 2 out reflects the firefighter safety, is what that's about.
Absolutely.
And then in terms of mentorship, you're really moving, or I should say, in the recruitment piece, you're moving into the mentorship at a much younger age in the schools to sort of reflect what's been going on kind of within the fire department for years for other people. So great approach. Thank you. A 2-prong approach. Okay, Chief Redd, you are up again. I'd like to ask you about recruitment as well, but your question is a little bit different. Recruitment of officers. National data shows the numbers of people applying for employment within the police department throughout the country is drastically lower than previous years. What is being done, or what plans are in place to recruit qualified police officers? And any thoughts, of course, in this panel, especially any thoughts on the recruitment of more women?
So I shared earlier in reference to putting a recruitment team in place. I firmly believe our numbers across the board should reflect the community in which we serve. So that includes the male-female ratio as well as ethnicity breakout across. I am taking a look at putting back into place our Police Explorer program, which is something that for reasons unknown to me, we stopped that a couple of years ago. And I think that was an excellent tool to gear young people into the realm of law enforcement. In addition to that, I will add that we have now retired officers that are working at the academies in some of the schools, and they're actually teaching. And I believe that that's an excellent opportunity for us as well. And once again, getting out to more of, the community events, the the job fairs and things of that nature, I think is going to be a benefit to us as well.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Okay, Chief Panko. Response time. I'm going to get a little bit quicker here too, so we can ensure that we ask as many questions as possible. From the moment a 911 call comes into the dispatcher to a crew on the scene, the NFPA the NFPA standard of 90% of time is 6.2 minutes, or the CPSE standard is 8.12 minutes. Fire response total is 8.26, not quite meeting either standard. You can clean this up for me too, Chief, if I am butchering this. The EMS response total is 10 minutes and 38 seconds. Does this meet the standard? Additionally, is it still standard practice to send a fire truck and crew with an ambulance call, and how is this justified with budgetary concerns? That's a loaded question.
Okay, so response times, I'll hit that first really quick, and then I'll move on to the fire truck ambulance response. So regarding response times, National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA, is the industry standard for response times. And they divide that up and look at fire response for structural firefighting, so anything in an actual structure, and then emergency medical calls, and how we would respond to those. So on the fire side, you get an extra 20 seconds, and that's to put your gear on. So it is 6 minutes and 20 seconds for a first response, and 10 minutes and 20 seconds for what we call an effective response force. And that's all the rest of the units we've deemed necessary to mitigate some of those initial things on scene that we do. So it's 6:20 and 10:20. We do not meet the national standard in terms of our times. And the other time you referenced there, CPSE, Center for Public Safety Excellence, those times are no longer, we still look at them, but CPSE no longer really looks at times, which is unfortunate because their times were all population based, and that really worked, pretty well for us. At any rate, our goal is to reach those times, that 6:20 for first, 10:20 for everything else, at the 90th percentile. So we currently for fire are at 8:26 and 9:31. So we do meet the everything else, right? The 9:31. And again, this is for structural firefighting. Specifically, this is our residential structure fire response, which is that is a more common structural fire that we respond to. And then the 8:26 for the first response. On the EMS side, same concept. The only difference is you don't get the extra 20 seconds to put your gear on, because you're not putting gear on to go on a medical call, and that is 6 minutes and 10 minutes. So from the time somebody calls 911 until the first unit on scene, 6 minutes. So currently we are at 4:55 and 6 minutes and 50 seconds for that. So we do meet that on the EMS side of things. So, that really is where I just want to make sure I gave you the right ones. I sure did. That is one we do, roughly 22 to 23,000 emergency medical calls a year. So that truly is kind of the bulk, if you will, of our response. But then on the fire side, that response, while it may not be as large of a number, it's a lot of time, because those calls do take a lot more time than the medical calls. So again, our response times, we don't meet the industry standard. We are constantly moving towards that. We evaluate it annually, and then we do a 5-year standards of cover, which is a huge risk assessment that we do of the entire city of Rockford, the fire department, and our performance there. So as far as that goes, we are working to improve that through some of our call processing, our call processing functions, and we have an entirely new computer system in the 911 center, and we have an automated system, and that all just went into effect within the last year. So we're hoping to see some quick, very visible improvements in our call processing times regarding that. And then as far as the fire truck and the ambulance, that's a very, easy explanation. We have 7 ambulances, but we have 13 fire trucks. So if you call for a medical call, you'll get a fire truck. Odds are you'll get the fire truck first. Every vehicle in the city of Rockford has a paramedic, at least one paramedic, and they can deliver advanced life support services. So we have some survivors that attend our survivor event every year that would attest to having that tandem response model that we do because we've been able to have some units on scene to immediately start life-saving efforts. So that is why we do have the fire truck as well as the ambulance.
Okay, thank you. Sounds like the technological pivot will kind of tell us in the next year or two too where you're at, where you're going.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, Chief Redd, Department Force Policy. The Vera Institute on Justice addresses the police culture of warriors instead of as public safety officers. How do you plan to incorporate the 6 pillars of police reform, which have been adopted by police chiefs in Illinois, to change this culture?
That is quite drawn out, especially dealing with the 6 pillars. With that being said, looking at the first pillar being building trust and legitimacy within your community that you serve, I'm going to use the body cameras as an example, because that definitely we're at the point of implementation with our body cameras on October 25th. That was a cry that we heard from the community. Definitely got the attention of City Council as well, thus the funding was approved. I can tell you I have not gotten one kickback from officers in regards to going to body cameras. In addition to that, on the realm of being transparent, we have set up 3 public meetings that will take place where that we're going to come out and disclose and get out in front of it and educate the community on how the body cameras will work, what they can expect from our officers as well. I think this is the longest policy that we have in place. It's 19 pages. So surrounding the body camera. So we wanted to make sure we dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's as well. So we value the opinions, and I want the community to know that we're listening. There's conversations to be had, people have things to say, and we're listening, and we'll make those shifts wherever we can. Talking about trust and, being transparent as well. The cameras are going to be the telltale. Granted, if I get complaints against the officer, it's one of the first things that the supervisor will be able to go to. Those body cameras are required to be on at any point that we're having contact with the community outside of a caretaking role with a community member. So that does include traffic stops. In addition, if we have a victim that requests that the camera be turned off, there's only certain parameters in which we would leave them on. So I think the body cameras is going to be a big move in the realm of building that trust. And we found studies have shown that too, the body cameras help in controlling the behavior of both parties. So not only law enforcement, but the civilians as well. So actually I'm looking forward to it. Policy and oversight, we put the policies out there in regards to, how the police department governs itself. I know there is a civilian review board that will be going into place relatively soon also. I'm thankful for those citizens that are expressing an interest to serve on such board, because it will be quite the time commitment in the realm of the education component also, because as law enforcement officers, we try and take that hat off and think from both spectrums. But I will tell you, it doesn't hurt to have that other side of it as well, because we can't see it all from a law enforcement officer perspective. So I think that's good as well. Technology and social media, it's a constant push. My PIO, she's probably tired of me within the past 5 weeks, almost 6 weeks, I think it is. But definitely using those resources to expand our communication. So I want to make sure, and we're going to be working on some cool training videos or just videos, especially you look at our traffic fatalities. There's just some fun educational videos that we can put out that will cause people to think. So that's something that I just laid on her plate within the last week. So she's probably like, what did I get myself into? I am a big proponent of community policing and crime reduction. I can tell you, having worked as a community service officer, when I went into that role and worked on the west side of Rockford, for the mere fact that I was a Black female in a uniform did not automatically gain me, the trust of the community. It just did not. And from a law enforcement perspective, we have to work to earn that trust. Our citizens in the city have been promised things over the years, and not just from law enforcement, and government as a whole has not met, those promises. So there's a reason why we're not always trusted. So granted, it may not have been something that we were actually involved in as an individual ourselves, but we have to recognize the fact that there's, the bigger picture that we are a part of. And so it doesn't matter to me if my predecessor promised something that didn't meet it. I think I have an obligation to have those conversations, and let's see how we can get to those standards that we need to get to. So, and in the realm of training and education, I think, from my perspective and Michelle's as well, as much training and education that we can get our employees, we always push for that. And as a matter of fact, we're working on training components for next year already to get some things into place. And I mentioned earlier, officer safety and wellness. So, when our officers are well, they can better serve the community.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, you really took into consideration a couple of other questions related to community policing with your answer. It sounds like education, training, policy, and oversight, and then body cams having that dual benefit for both the citizen and the officer.
Yes.
Thank you. Chief Panko, firefighter safety. 48 on-duty fatalities occurred in the United States in 2019. Many of the fatalities were identified as heart attacks related to stress, overexertion, some anxiety, and symptoms of PTSD. Unknown numbers of thousands of injuries, we would all agree this is a high-risk occupation. Additionally, firefighters have a 250% higher chance of developing cancer due to exposure to carcinogens. What resources are available to the fire department and to employees to help with safety in relation to these identified issues?
Great question. So yes, much higher rate of cancer in firefighters. And I look back, I've been on the department I'm closing in on 29 years. And I look at how things were in terms of equipment, response, what we did to protect ourselves when I started versus where we're at now, and what a difference. We have really evolved over the years to incorporate better practices, whether it be better gear, a second set of gear. So we provide our firefighters with a second set of gear. And that is so that once they do catch some type of a fire, they don't have to put that gear back on that has now been exposed to all the carcinogens, right? In the fire with all the soot. They have an opportunity to send that off to be cleaned, and they have a clean set of gear to wear. Our breathing apparatus, we've continued to improve breathing apparatus over the years. We have also moved toward what's called a clean cab concept, and that is sort of that decontamination at the scene very quickly to get some of those major contaminants off you, and then keeping your contaminated gear in an outside compartment and not bringing it into the cab of the truck with you. So much so we have put the decon kits on all of the vehicles, and that has just been in the last couple of years that we've implemented that, as well as the risk reduction policy and procedure to support that. So we continue to move in the right direction in terms of cancer prevention and doing as much as we can to limit the exposure. Although obviously due to the nature of the work, there is going to be an exposure, but we do really work to try and reduce the exposure to carcinogens. On the PTSD side, this is something, and Chief Redd touched, very quickly on the wellness of our folks and our personnel, and that is paramount, obviously. And we really have worked to support our personnel in the development of our peer support group, which is an anonymous group that firefighters can reach out to, and that can be triggered by anything. The great thing is that it's anonymous. They make the call, and it's just kept there. But we wanted to expand that. So we want to be able to address it. So we're not just relying on that person to make the call, right? So if we identify certain events that would trigger a response from our critical incident stress team. So we are in the process of training that critical incident management team currently, so that we can support our personnel when they need it, at the time of the incident or very shortly after. And that's critical to address it at that point within a certain amount of time, and then support that with our, employee assistance program, which we already do have in place through the city of Rockford, but just sort of bridging that gap and really, really focusing on our personnel to make sure that their mental health is in a good place.
Great, thank you. It sounds like some simple practices like gear exchange and clean cab are happening to reduce exposure issues. And then what the pandemic has taught all of us, that our health causes a ripple effect with our coworkers and with our families, that it's good to hear what you're doing in both departments in terms of prevention and education and resources. Okay, Chief Redd, racial profiling. This has been an ongoing issue identified in police departments all over the country. How is this issue being addressed in Rockford? Does the department compile comprehensive data on traffic stops, arrests, etc., to do ongoing internal quality checks on police behavior and training with bias, microaggression, and cultural sensitivities? So the topic is racial profiling, and you can kind of take it from there.
Okay, so in the state of Illinois, Senate Bill 30 was passed back in 2003, focused around the fact of gathering traffic stop data, and more specifically looking at whether or not there was a racial bias, or I have a specific officer that may have been maybe identified was stopping someone because of their ethnicity. With that being said, also we do have systems in place that it's like an early warning system. It will trigger the supervisor to look at certain things if an individual officer, the data shows that they're stopping a particular race more often than others. The other factor that we also that we take into place, that we look at, would be also geographically the area in which that individual works across the city. So we do have multiple systems in place that will cause a supervisor to look at those things. And we've gone well beyond, of course, reporting data on traffic stops. We're doing pedestrian stops as well. And also, there is annual training that our officers go through. I won't just say our officers, it's department-wide, so civilian employees as well, that they go to, they receive in the realm of implicit bias, microaggression, and things of that nature. So we stay on top of it, I think, as much as we can. With that also, we also will, if a citizen believes that they were stopped because of the color of their skin, or whatever it may be, that complaint can be filed online. It can be a phone call just to get the process started. And the supervisors, each complaint that comes in is assigned to a supervisor. And the supervisor will then, they have to look into, investigate that complaint. And it doesn't stop there, because then it goes to, it will go from that sergeant to the lieutenant, and from there it goes to the district chief, so that there's multiple layers to that where we make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And if we come across somebody where it appears there's a problem there, we deal with each individual on an individual basis.
Thank you, Chief Redd.
You're welcome.
I think I'll follow up with one more question with Chief Redd, and then we have the same question for both of you to conclude today's forum. Chief Redd, what do you think the role of a civilian review board should be?
Well, honestly, and I'll take it exactly as it is. I've got 24 years of law enforcement underneath my belt. So I believe the Civilian Review Board should be there in an advisory capacity. Especially if there's not, I think there's a lot of value gained by having someone on that Civilian Review Board that has some law enforcement experience that can further educate. So when we talk about a Civilian Review Board here in Rockford, although we're putting in training that Civilian Review Board will go through, you can't jam 24 years into, a 2-week training, as it may be. There's a lot to be said for those lived life experiences. So I mentioned it earlier, hats off to, the civilians that, have expressed an interest into serving on such board. And I definitely look forward to working with them. And like I said, having someone that, lived a lot of those experiences to serve on that board would definitely be beneficial in the realm of education, so.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Okay, thank you. We have the last question for both of you because a couple of your questions were answered. You doubled up on a couple of them. So they were all asked that were submitted. How can the League of Women Voters of Greater Rockford, as well as the attendees on this call and the community at large, which eventually may see this video, how can we best support you in your role and you to help you accomplish your vision and your goals? Do you want to go ahead first, Chief Panko?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, I would say to the league, as well as anyone who may watch or see this down the road, we can't do this alone. And I feel like I also speak for Chief Redd a little bit in this, is that we can't do it alone. So we don't want it, and I certainly don't want to do it in a vacuum. So the networking and being able to support just exactly what it is we're trying to accomplish, getting our message out, getting my message out, my vision out, and really helping support in that recruitment effort as well. I think that this is a fantastic group to push out some of our efforts in terms of recruiting, especially specific to women. That does seem to be one particular area that we really we don't have a large number of that. So I would say that, just the support, the opportunity to do this and be here today, just continuing that relationship. And then also just really trying to network and make connections to get the message out about what it is we do and, how we can support our workforce. So that would be the biggest thing I would say.
Thank you, Chief. How about you, Chief Redd?
I think Michelle summed it up pretty nicely. I would say for those that, do watch this video at either if you're on here now or you watch it at a later time, to both definitely look, Michelle, I'm gonna load you in the boat. Michelle and I come out, if you're dealing with young people and to give us an opportunity to come out and talk to them and maybe, pique their interest a little bit into whether it's law enforcement or, fire department, but definitely, give us a jingle. We'll be more than happy to come out. And if for some reason we can't make it, if you're having different fairs or talking about different careers, law enforcement, public safety as a whole, I think is an excellent field to jump into. I can tell you, I didn't have anyone recruiting me necessarily. It was not my dream as a young girl to be a police officer when I grew up. But you know, as I made it into adulthood, I did have a recruiter on the department that he saw something in me, and he never gave up. Every time I saw him, he would ask me, "Are you ready to test? Are you ready to test yet?" So I really appreciate him for that. Also, for those who may not, you know, have their minds made up yet, if you're talking to some individuals, and they don't necessarily have to be young folks, but, you know, young folks or adults that have expressed an interest, I encourage them to do a ride along. We have not opened up our ride along program full throttle at this point, but I am authorizing some, you know, certain exemptions to get some people in the door to do ride alongs. And just like, you know, Michelle stated as well, you know, the support as we move forward on, you know, turning the corner is definitely appreciated.
Thank you so much. Sounds like using our networks would be really helpful to you. Recruitment efforts through our networks, as well as forums and classroom potential for you to come and visit and speak to kids in our youth. This concludes our program for this afternoon. I would like to just close and tell you a little bit more about the League of Women Voters of Greater Rockford. It is a membership organization. The League encourages informed and active participation in government. It works to increase the understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League of Women Voters of Greater Rockford registers voters and provides voters with election information through voter guides, both online and in print, as well as candidate forums and debates and public official panel discussions such as this one today. Membership is open to all registered voters. Please become a member today at www.LWVGR, League of Women Voters of Greater Rockford.org. Thank you again to Chief Redd and Chief Pankow for your time and your commitment to our community. It's very exciting for us to host you as the incoming chiefs, as well as women playing these two particular roles in our community. And a big thank you to those in attendance. Without your engagement, our public officials would not have their finger on the pulse of our city's needs, challenges, and opportunities. Thank you all for joining us today.
And I'd also like to thank our chief, both Panko and also Reed. But I also want to thank our audience for joining us today for Herstory, Meet and Greet Rockford's first women police and fire chiefs. Now, in preparation for the seminar today, we asked citizens to submit questions for both Chief Redd and Chief Pankow. And I must say, we definitely received excellent questions. However, because of time constraints, we were limited to the questions that we could ask. So I would like to work with Chief Redd and Chief Pankow to have another seminar so we can pose more questions and continue in our discussions. Chief Pankow, could you come back to join us?
Absolutely.
Excellent. And I'm going to pose the same question to Chief Redd. Will you come back and join us?
Definitely.
Okay, great. So in closing, if you did not hear your question today, of course, come back and stay tuned for our next seminar. And for those who didn't ask questions, we are having another webinar coming up, and get your questions in. But in the meantime, stay safe and have a great day.